The massive doors of the Galactic Tribunal slid open with a deep hiss, revealing a chamber so vast it could house an entire starship. Crystalline walls stretched upward into darkness, their surfaces alive with pulsing lights that translated every word into thousands of alien languages. The air itself seemed to vibrate with power as translation. Frequencies hummed through the atmosphere. Kethfer stepped into the chamber, his heavy footsteps echoing off the polished floor. Once, he had been the pride of the Zephyrian military, a towering warrior whose forearms could wield weapons with deadly precision. Now, those same arms were twisted metal and synthetic flesh, cybernetic replacements that sparked and whirred with each movement. The humans had taken his original limbs during the war, but they had left him with something far worse, the memories of how they had done it. His gray scales, once bright and metallic, had faded to the color of old steel. Scars crisscrossed his face like a roadmap of battles fought and lost. But it was his eyes that told the real story, 3 black orbs that had seen too much. Reflecting the kind of darkness that only came from witnessing the impossible, the witness. Stan rose from the floor as he approached, a living piece of technology that molded itself to his alien form. As he settled into position, the chamber's lights dimmed, focusing all attention on the scarred veteran. The silence that followed was so complete that even the translation frequencies seemed to hold their breath. Around him, representatives from 12 different species occupied floating platforms arranged in a perfect circle. There was Admiral Dexola of the Aquatic Syndicate, her tentacles writhing in slow, hypnotic patterns as she studied him with compound eyes. The Crystalline Collective's representative gleamed like a living diamond, light refracting through its body in rainbow patterns. The Hive Queen's drone buzzed softly, its insectoid features unreadable. Each species had their own reasons for being here. Their own fears about the humans who had somehow carved out a place in the galaxy, despite being relative newcomers. "State your designation and service record for the Galactic Archives, Admiral," Dexola commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had never known defeat. The water that surrounded her platform rippled with each word, creating patterns that her species used for emphasis. Kethfer's throat clicked as he prepared to speak, a sound that made several representatives shift uncomfortably. Kethfer, former battle commander of the 47th Zephyrian Assault Legion. Service record spans 43 standard years. I commanded fleet operations in the Outer Rim territories and led ground forces in 17 major planetary campaigns. He paused, his cybernetic arms worry as they adjusted their grip on the witness stand. I served in the Terracephrian War from 2387 to 2392, commanding forces that engaged human military units across 14 star systems. The numbers meant nothing to most of the tribunal, but to military minds like Admiral Dexola, they painted a picture of a career soldier who had seen more combat than most officers would experience in 3 lifetimes. This was not some desk-bound bureaucrat or political appointee. This was a warrior speaking from experience. "You are here to provide testimony regarding human war crimes committed during the Terracephrian conflict," Dexola continued, consulting a datapad that floated beside her platform. "The Galactic Council requires detailed accounts of human violations of the Warfare Accords, particularly their treatment of prisoners and civilian populations. Your testimony will be used to determine whether humanity should be granted full membership in the Galactic Council or classified as a hostile species requiring containment." The chamber's atmosphere seemed to thicken with anticipation. For months, debates had raged about the humans and their rapid expansion into galactic space. Some species saw them as potential allies, primitive but promising. Others viewed them as a threat that needed to be eliminated before they could develop more advanced technology. The decision would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. Kethfer's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sound that echoed through the chamber like breaking glass. In Zephyrian culture, this clicking could mean many things: amusement, terror, or the kind of bitter understanding that came from learning a terrible truth. The representatives leaned forward, uncertain which emotion they were witnessing. "War crimes?" Kethfer repeated, his voice carrying a note of something that might have been laughter if it hadn't been so hollow. "Honored Tribunal, I fear you. have misunderstood why I am here. I'm not here to list human violations of your precious warfare accords. I am here to warn you about something far more dangerous than crimes. The chamber erupted in confused murmurs and alien vocalizations. Representatives turned to each other, their translation devices struggling to keep up with the sudden cacophony of voices. The mighty Zephyrian Empire, conquerors of 37 worlds, had never officially admitted defeat. Their military machine was considered the finest in the galaxy, their technology superior to most other species. The idea that they could have lost to the humans was impossible to accept. Admiral. Thexola's tentacles lashed the water around her platform, creating waves that splashed against the crystalline walls. Explain yourself, Battle Commander. Zephyrian Empire withdrew from human space due to strategic considerations, not defeat. Your own High Command has made this clear in all official communications. Kethfer's laugh was a broken sound that seemed to come from somewhere deep in his chest. Strategic withdrawal. Is that what they called it? I suppose it sounds better than the truth. He looked around the chamber, his three eyes taking in each representative in turn. The humans don't fight wars the way we understand them. They don't fight for territory or resources or glory. They fight for survival. And there is nothing more dangerous in this galaxy than a human who believes they are about to die. The silence that followed was deafening. In that moment, every representative in the chamber understood that they were about to hear something that would change their understanding of the species they had dismissed as primitive newcomers. The humans had done something to the mighty Zephyrian Empire, something that had left this battle-scarred veteran broken and haunted. Kethfer cybernetic. Arms adjusted their grip on the witness stand, servos whining under the strain. You want to know about war crimes? I will tell you about war crimes, but not the ones you expect. I will tell you about the crimes we committed against ourselves, crimes we were willing to commit to defeat an enemy that refused to surrender, refused to break, refused to die quietly. The chamber held its breath as the scarred veteran prepared to reveal the truth about humanity's first war with an alien species. In the distance, through the tribunal's transparent dome, the stars twinkled with innocent light. Unaware of the testimony that would reshape galactic politics forever, the holographic projector in the center of the tribunal chamber flickered to life, casting a three-dimensional map of the galaxy's outer rim territories. Blue dots marked human colonies scattered across dozens of star systems, each one a small island of earthborn life in the vast darkness of space. Kethfer's cybernetic hand moved through the display, his metal fingers leaving trails of light. As he navigated the star charts, the year was 2387, he began, his voice carrying the weight of someone reliving a nightmare. The Zephyrian High Command had been monitoring human expansion for 3 standard years. Your species had been remarkably quiet, establishing agricultural colonies and mining operations with what appeared to be minimal military presence. Our intelligence suggested you were farmers and miners, not warriors. The hologram zoomed in. On a single star system, revealing a blue-green world orbiting a yellow sun. Cities spread across the continents like glowing webs, connected by transportation networks that pulsed with activity. Orbital platforms dotted the space around the planet, their solar panels gleaming like metallic flowers. New Busan was your 15th colony world, Kethfer continued, his 3 eyes focusing on the floating image. Population estimates put civilian numbers at 2.3 million, with maybe 1,000 security personnel and a handful of outdated defense platforms. It looked like the perfect target for our first demonstration of Zephyrian power. Admiral Vexola's tentacles writhed with interest. Your intelligence was accurate? On paper? Yes. But intelligence reports don't capture the spirit of a species. Kethfer's mandibles clicked softly. We approached New Busan with a standard intimidation fleet, 12 heavy cruisers, 30 escort vessels, and 2 assault carriers loaded with ground forces, enough firepower to level a planet twice that size. The hologram shifted to show the approaching Zephyrian fleet, their ships dark and angular like predatory insects. The vessels moved in perfect formation, their hulls bristling with weapon systems that could reduce cities to smoking craters. In minutes, Fleet Admiral Vextel commanded the operation. He was a career officer, 60 years of experience, as a veteran of the Crystalline Wars. He sent the standard surrender demand on all frequencies, expecting the humans to see reason when, faced with overwhelming force, a tribunal chamber fell silent as an audio recording began to play. The voice that emerged from the speakers was distinctly human, warm, measured, with the slight accent that marked someone who had learned Galactic Standard as a second language. "This is Governor Park Hyan Wu of New Busan Colony. We have received your surrender demands and reviewed your terms. Our response is simple. Come and take it." Several representatives shifted uncomfortably at the calm defiance in the human's voice. There was no fear, no desperation, just a quiet determination that seemed to resonate through the chamber. "We thought it was typical primitive bravado," Kethver continued. Admiral Vextel actually laughed when he heard the transmission. He ordered a demonstration bombardment of an uninhabited area, expecting the humans to reconsider when they saw our weapons in action. The hologram showed energy beams lancing down from orbit, carving a perfectly circular crater in an empty field outside the colony's main city. The display of power was meant to be surgical, precise, terrifying in its implications. Governor Park's second transmission came an hour later. He thanked us for the demonstration and asked if we were finished with the fireworks. Then he said something that should have warned us about what we were facing. Another audio clip played, the same calm voice. "We've shown this recording to our children so they understand what they're up against. They're not afraid. They're angry. And angry humans are dangerous humans." Kethver's cybernetic arms whirred as he gestured toward the hologram. The landing began at dawn, colony time. 3 divisions of Zephyrian shock troops, 30,000 soldiers, equipped with the finest weapons and armor our technology could produce. We expected to secure the major population centers within 6 hours. The display showed dropships descending through the atmosphere like falling meteors, their hulls glowing. With re-entry heat, they touched down in perfectly coordinated waves, disgorging thousands of armored soldiers who immediately began advancing toward the human cities. The first sign that something was wrong came when we reached the outer settlements. The farms were empty, but not abandoned. The humans had booby-trapped everything, irrigation systems filled with explosive compounds, grain silos rigged to collapse, even the livestock fitted with proximity mines. The veteran's voice took on a hollow quality as he continued, but those were just the opening moves. The real shock came when we reached the suburban areas. Every house was a fortress. Every family was armed, where children who should have been playing with toys were carrying weapons and taking cover behind furniture that had been reinforced with metal plating. The hologram shifted to show tactical displays of the battle, red dots representing Zephyrian forces slowly advancing through a maze of residential streets, while blue dots human defenders moved in seemingly random patterns around them. Grandmother Kim Yunya lived in a small house on Maple Street. She was 73 years old, a retired teacher who grew flowers in her garden. Our intelligence files listed her as a non-combatant, no military training, no weapons permits. When my advance squad reached her neighborhood, she was sitting on her front porch, knitting. Kethver's 3 eyes closed for a moment, as if he were trying to shut out the memory. She waited until 30 of my soldiers were walking past her house. Then she smiled, pulled the pin on a plasma grenade hidden in her knitting basket, and held it tight against her chest. The explosion took out my entire advance squad and left a crater where her house used to be. The tribunal chamber was deadly. Quiet. Several representatives had stopped breathing entirely, their alien physiology frozen in shock at the image of an elderly human woman choosing death over surrender. But that wasn't the worst part, Kethver continued, his voice barely above a whisper. The worst part was what we found in the schools. The humans had turned their educational facilities into fortress factories. Children were working in shifts, manufacturing ammunition from school supplies while their teachers coordinated defensive strategies using classroom computers. The hologram showed the interior of a human school, its hallways lined with makeshift barricades and weapon emplacements. In the classrooms, young humans worked at tables covered with electronics and chemical compounds, their faces focused and determined. Lee Jae-soon was 16 years old, a student at New Busan Technical High School. He was studying engineering, planning to become a starship designer after graduation. When we breached his school, we found that he had spent 3 weeks turning the entire building into a massive explosive device. The veteran's cybernetic hands clenched into fists. Ow. He could have escaped. His friends begged him to run when they saw our forces approaching. Instead, he stayed at his post in the school's central computer lab, waiting for the right moment. When 200 of my troops entered the building, he looked directly at our lead squad and said, "This is for humanity's future." The explosion that followed was shown in the hologram. A building-sized fireball that consumed everything within. 3 blocks. The shockwaves shattered windows across the entire district and left a smoking crater where the school had stood. "The siege lasted 3 months, Kethver said, his voice hollow with exhaustion. Every day brought new horrors, new examples of human determination that defied everything we thought we knew about warfare. They turned their own children into soldiers, their elderly into weapons, their schools into battlefields. The hologram showed the final stages of the battle, Zephyrian forces slowly advancing through a city that had been transformed into a maze of rubble and death. Every street corner was a potential ambush, every building a fortress, every human, civilian, a potential enemy combatant. When we finally controlled New Busan, we discovered the humans' final act of defiance. They had poisoned their own water supplies and destroyed their food stores, had sabotaged their power plants, and demolished their factories. They left us with nothing but a planet of ruins and corpses. The veteran looked around the chamber, his 3 eyes reflecting the holographic light. We had lost 40,000 soldiers to take a single colony, 80,000 of our finest warriors, killed by farmers and teachers and children who refused to surrender. And in the end, we had won nothing but dirt and ashes. The hologram faded, leaving the tribunal chamber in darkness except for the soft glow of the translation frequencies. In that silence, every representative understood that they had just witnessed the beginning of something that would change the galaxy forever. The holographic display flickered and expanded, filling the entire tribunal chamber with the image of a world that had once been the jewel of human industrial might. New Stalingrad hung in the simulated space like a metallic sphere, its surface covered in a web of gleaming factories, massive foundries, and urban centers that stretched across entire continents. Orbital shipyards surrounded the planet like a crown of steel and glass, their construction bays large enough to build the massive colony ships that had carried humanity to the stars. Kethver's breathing became shallow and labored as he stared at the holographic world. His cybernetic arms twitched involuntarily, their servos whining in protest as old battle programming tried to activate. Even decades later, the mere sight of that planet triggered responses buried deep in his warrior's instincts. He whispered, the name carrying the weight of a curse. 15 million humans called it home, the beating heart of humanity's industrial expansion into the outer rim. Every starship, every weapon, every piece of technology that your species used to carve out their place in the galaxy was built in those factories. The display zoomed in on the Kepler system, showing a cluster of asteroids orbiting a dying red giant star. The asteroid belt was a maze of rocky debris left over from the system's formation. Perfect cover for ships that wanted to remain hidden from long-range sensors. Admiral Vextel commanded Task Force Omega, our finest battle group. 12 dreadnoughts, 30 heavy cruisers, and over 100 support vessels. The pride of the Zephyrian fleet, ships that had conquered entire star systems without losing a single vessel. The hologram showed the Zephyrian fleet in all its terrible glory. Massive warships that bristled with weapons, their hulls covered in armor plating that could withstand direct hits from planetary defense cannons. Each dreadnought was a kilometer long, carrying enough firepower to reduce a moon to asteroids. We received intelligence about a hidden human base in the Kepler belt. The source appeared reliable. Human merchant captain who claimed to have information about military installations in exchange for safe passage out of the war zone. The coordinates he provided showed a perfect location for a secret facility. Admiral Dexola's tentacles writhed with interest. The intelligence was false. Not false, Kethver corrected, his mandibles clicking with bitter amusement.
Accurate.
There was indeed a human installation at those coordinates. What our intelligence failed to mention was that it was a trap that had been preparing for us for months. The holographic display showed the Zephyrian fleet entering the asteroid belt in standard formation, their sensors sweeping the rocky debris for signs of the hidden base. The ships moved with the confidence of predators who had never encountered anything that could threaten them. Commander Han Seokjin had been waiting for us. He was a human naval officer who had lost his entire family when we bombarded New Busan, his wife, his 2 children, his elderly parents, all vaporized in the first wave of our attack. But instead of breaking him, their deaths had transformed him into something that haunted our nightmares. The veteran's 3 eyes closed as he continued. Han had spent 8 months studying our fleet patterns, our communication protocols, our tactical preferences. He had somehow obtained detailed specifications of our ship's crew manifests, even personal files on our officers. The humans had turned espionage into an art form. The display showed the trap in devastating detail. Dozens of asteroids had been hollowed out and packed with nuclear charges, their surfaces carefully camouflaged to hide the excavation work. Sensor arrays had been positioned throughout the belt, creating a network that could track every movement of the approaching fleet. When we entered the belt, we found the base exactly where the intelligence had indicated. It was a modest facility, maybe 100 personnel, lightly defended. Admiral Vextel ordered a standard assault pattern surround the installation. Demand surrender. Destroy it if they refused. The hologram showed the Zephyrian ships moving into position around the human base, formation perfect, their weapons charged and ready. It looked like a routine military operation, the kind of engagement that had been repeated dozens of times throughout the war. The first asteroid exploded when our lead dreadnought was directly above it. The blast tore through the ship's hull like tissue paper, venting atmosphere and crew into space. Before we could react, the second and third charges detonated, catching our escort cruisers in a crossfire of nuclear fire. The display showed the battle in horrifying detail. Massive explosions blooming like deadly flowers among the Zephyrian fleet. Each blast taking out multiple ships as debris and radiation spread through the formation. In minutes, the pride of the Zephyrian Navy had been reduced to burning wreckage. But the explosions were not the real trap, Kethver continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. The real trap was psychological. As our ships died, Commander Han began broadcasting on all frequencies. He spoke our names as we burned. The tribunal chamber fell silent as an audio recording began to play. The voice that emerged was distinctly human, calm, and measured, despite the chaos of battle raging around him. Commander Zexthal, of the Dreadnought Eternal Glory, age 47. Veteran of the Crystalline Wars, survived by 3 offspring and a mate who teaches music on the homeworld. He dreamed of returning home to hear his youngest child's first concert. The effect on the tribunal was immediate and disturbing. Several representatives shifted uncomfortably as they realized what they were hearing. Intimate details about enemy soldiers being broadcast during their final moments. Captain Vexani of the cruiser Stormbringer. She joined the fleet to honor her father's memory, killed in the border conflicts. She kept his medal in her personal quarters and looked at it. Every night before sleep, she died clutching it to her chest as her ship broke apart. Kethver's cybernetic arms clenched into fists as he relived the nightmare. Yet our personnel files, our family records, our private communications, as he knew our fears, our hopes, our dreams. He made our deaths personal, intimate. He turned us from soldiers into individuals, and individuals could feel pain. The hologram showed the aftermath of the battle, debris fields that had once been proud warships. Emergency beacons crying out from escape pods scattered throughout the asteroid belt. Of the 143 ships that had entered the Kepler system, only 17 survived to retreat. My communications officer, Texani, broke down completely when Han described her 3 offspring waiting for her return to the homeworld. She had to be sedated and removed from duty. She was not the only one. Across the fleet, soldiers were suffering from what human psychologists call moral injury. The veteran looked around the chamber, his 3 eyes reflecting the holographic light. The humans had weaponized empathy. They made us see ourselves as individuals rather than soldiers. They made us question why we were fighting, what we hoped to achieve, whether victory was worth the cost. The display shifted to show other human commanders who had adopted similar tactics. Captain No Yanzuk appeared in the hologram, a human. Woman in her 30s, whose eyes held the kind of determination that came from having nothing left to lose. Captain No commanded a small fleet of human raiders that harassed our supply lines. Before each attack, she would broadcast the recorded last words of Zephyrian soldiers who had died in previous battles. She wanted us to understand the cost of every engagement, the price of every victory. The audio recordings were haunting. Alien voices speaking in their native languages, calling out for their families, expressing regret for battles they would never see end. The humans had collected these final transmissions and turned them into weapons of psychological warfare. Lieutenant Kexel's final message to his offspring: tell them their father fought with honor, but that honor is cold comfort when you're dying alone in the dark. Captain Veximer's last transmission.
Ow.
I don't understand why we're here anymore. These humans fight like cornered beasts, but they die like heroes. What does that make us? The recordings continued. Each one a dagger thrust into the morale of the surviving Zephyrian forces. The humans had learned that destroying ships and killing soldiers was not enough. They had to break the will to fight. To make their enemies question the very nature of the conflict. By the war's third year, our soldiers were suffering from what human psychologists call moral injury, Kethfer continued. We had the superior technology, the larger fleets, the greater numbers. But the humans had made us afraid, not of death, but of what we might become to achieve victory. The holographic display showed the final stages of the conflict, Zephyrian fleets that moved with hesitation. Officers who questioned orders, soldiers who looked at their enemies and saw reflections of themselves. The humans had turned the mighty Zephyrian war machine into a force that doubted its own purpose. The humans had become pack hunters, and we were their prey. They stalked us across the galaxy, learning our weaknesses, exploiting our fears, turning our own humanity against us. They had shown us that victory without honor was meaningless, that conquest without purpose was merely destruction. The hologram faded, leaving the tribunal chamber in darkness. In that silence, every representative understood that they had witnessed something unprecedented, the defeat of a superior military force, not through firepower or technology, but through the simple act of making their enemies remember what they were fighting for. The massive tribunal chamber had become a tomb of silence. Every representative from the 12 species sat frozen in their floating platforms, their alien forms motionless as they processed the weight of Kethver's testimony, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Even the soft glow of the holographic projectors had dimmed, leaving only the pale starlight filtering through the transparent dome overhead. Kethver stood at the witness podium like a broken monument to a war that had redefined the galaxies. Understanding of conflict, his cybernetic arms hung at his sides, their servos quiet for the first time since his testimony began. The scars that crisscrossed his gray scales seemed deeper in the dim light, each one a reminder of battles fought. Against an enemy that had transformed warfare itself, the war ended not with humanity's surrender, but with ours, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, yet somehow filling the vast chamber. After 5 years of conflict, 5 years of watching our finest soldiers broken by an enemy that refused to follow the rules of civilized warfare, the Zephyrion High Command made a decision that shocked the entire galaxy. Admiral Vexola's tentacles writhed with confusion, creating ripples in the water that surrounded her platform. Her compound eyes focused on the scarred veteran with an intensity that made the air itself seem to vibrate. Explain yourself, Battle Commander. Our intelligence reports from that period clearly showed that human resistance was crumbling. Your forces controlled 17 of their 23 colony worlds. Victory appeared inevitable. Kethver's laugh was a sound that belonged in nightmares, bitter, broken, and filled with the kind of understanding that came from staring into an abyss and recognizing your own reflection. Winning, Admiral? We were becoming monsters, the humans, had shown us what we would have to become to defeat them completely. They had held up a mirror to our souls, and we did not like what we saw looking back. The holographic display flickered to life one final time, showing the last major battle of the Terra-Cephrian War. The planet New Sol hung in simulated space, its surface scarred by orbital bombardments, but still glowing with the lights of human civilization. It was smaller than New Stalingrad, less industrialized than New Busan, but it had become the symbol of humanity's refusal to surrender. New Sol was their final major colony, defended by just 50,000 humans against our army. Of 500,000, the odds were 10 to 1 in our favor. We had orbital superiority, advanced weapons, and 5 years of combat experience. By every military calculation, the battle should have lasted hours. The display zoomed in to show the human defensive positions, hastily constructed bunkers surrounding a city that had been transformed into a fortress. Gardens had become weapons emplacements. Schools had been converted into command centers. Even the local hospital had been fortified with armor plating and defensive barriers. General Park Ji-hoon commanded the human defense. He was 53 years old, a career soldier who had fought in humanity's colonial expansion wars. Beside him stood Colonel Lee Hai-jin, a logistics specialist who had never commanded combat troops before the war began. They had no hope of victory, no possibility of reinforcement, no chance of survival. The veteran's cybernetic hands clenched into fists as he continued, but they fought anyway. They fought because surrender meant the extinction of their species. They fought because their children were watching from bunkers beneath the city. They fought because they were human, and humans do not go quietly into extinction. The holographic battle played out in horrifying detail. Zephyrian forces advanced in perfect formation, their armor gleaming under the alien sun, their weapons charged and ready. Against them stood a ragtag army of farmers, teachers, shopkeepers, and children who had learned to fight because the alternative was death. The siege lasted 72 hours of continuous combat that redefined everything we thought we knew about warfare. The humans had no advanced weapons, no orbital support, no reinforcements coming to save them. They had only their determination and their refusal to surrender. The display showed human defenders using improvised weapons against Zephyrian battle. Armor. Teachers threw homemade explosives from classroom windows. Children carried ammunition through tunnels they had dug beneath the city. Elderly civilians operated communications equipment from basement command centers that shook with each enemy bombardment. When we finally breached the outer defenses, we found something that shattered the morale of our finest troops. The humans had been using their own bodies as shields to protect their wounded. They formed human chains to carry injured soldiers to safety, knowing that they would likely die in the process. Kethver's voice cracked as he described the scene that had haunted his dreams for decades. A medical student who had volunteered to serve as a battlefield medic when the siege began. When we found her, she was dead, but she had died trying to save a Zephyrian soldier, one of my own troops, who had been wounded by friendly fire during the confusion of urban combat. The hologram showed the medical station where Shin Woo-jin had made her final stand. Human and Zephyrian blood mixed on the floor, medical supplies scattered around the bodies of soldiers from both sides. The young medic had died with a Zephyrian plasma rifle wound in her chest, her hands still pressed against the bandages she had been applying to her enemy's wounds. Even in defeat, even facing annihilation, they showed mercy to their enemies. Even when we were destroying their world, killing their families, ending their civilization, they still saw us as individuals worthy of compassion. The tribunal chamber was so quiet that the soft hum of life support systems seemed thunderous. Several representatives had stopped breathing entirely, their alien physiologies frozen in shock at the image of a human medic dying while trying to save an enemy soldier. That night, as we stood among the ruins of New Sol, as we counted our dead and tried to understand what we had witnessed, Admiral Vextel sent a message to the High Command that changed the course of galactic history. An audio recording began to play, the voice of a Zephyrian military officer speaking in their native language. Translated for the tribunal's benefit, High Command. This is Admiral Vextel reporting from New Sol. The colony has been secured, but at a cost that defies comprehension. We have broken these humans, but in doing so, they have broken something in us. I request immediate withdrawal from human space. We cannot continue this war without losing our souls." The recording ended, leaving the chamber in absolute silence. Kethford looked around at the assembled representatives, his three eyes reflecting the starlight that filtered through the dome overhead. "We withdrew because we realized that to truly defeat humanity, we would have to exterminate them completely. Every last human, on every world, down to the smallest child. And to do that, we would have to abandon everything that made us civilized. We would have to become the very monsters we accused them of being." The veteran's cybernetic arms spread wide, encompassing the entire chamber in his gesture. "The humans didn't lose the war-honored tribunal. They won it by showing us who we were becoming. They held up a mirror to our civilization and forced us to see the reflection. They saved us from ourselves." Kethfer began to rise from the witness stand. His mechanical limbs worried softly as they supported his weight. "I am not here to testify about human war crimes. I am here to recommend that humanity be granted full membership in the Galactic Council, because any species capable of such sacrifice, such determination, such unwavering commitment to their own survival, and the protection of their young, such a species deserves our respect, not our condemnation." His voice carried the weight of absolute conviction as he delivered his final words. "The humans are not our enemies. They are our teachers. They have shown us what it truly means to fight for something greater than ourselves. They have shown us the price of freedom and the cost of hope. They have shown us that victory without honor is meaningless, that sometimes the greatest triumph is knowing when to stop fighting." The chamber remained silent for long moments after Kethver's testimony ended. The weight of his words hung in the air like a physical presence, transforming the formal hearing into something that felt more like a sacred ritual than a legal proceeding. Finally, Admiral Dexola spoke, her voice carrying a note of something that might have been reverence. "The tribunal will recess to consider this testimony. Thank you, Battle Commander Kethfer, for your ... illuminating words." As the alien representatives began to file out of the chamber, their movements slow and thoughtful, Kethfer remained standing at the witness podium. His forearms hung limply at his sides, but his three eyes were fixed on something beyond the transparent walls of the tribunal chamber. There, hanging in the star-filled darkness of space like a blue-green jewel, was Earth, humanity's birthworld, unconquered and free. Its surface hidden beneath swirls of white clouds that looked almost peaceful from this distance. It was impossible to imagine that such a beautiful world had produced warriors capable of bringing the mighty Zephraian Empire to its knees. 3 days later, the vote was unanimous. Humanity was granted full membership in the Galactic Council, with all the rights and protections that such membership provided. The decision was announced across the galaxy, broadcast on every frequency, transmitted to every world where intelligent life had learned to look up at the stars and wonder what lay beyond. The galaxy had learned an important lesson that day, one that would be remembered for generations to come. Never underestimate a species that fights not just for victory, but for the right to exist. Never underestimate the power of hope when it is wielded by those who have nothing left to lose. And never underestimate the humans, the END,